Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to take another look at HTML. This video is part of a larger series of videos that focuses on an introduction to HTML and CSS. And specifically in this video, we are going to take a look at a few different ways to utilize images. We're going to start off with the IMG tag. You can see here that I have the W3 Schools page up. And we're just going to take a quick look at some of the pieces of the IMG tag, some of the attributes, starting with the source attribute. The source attribute is what allows for you to specify the file. In this case, in the example here, a JPEG file, although we'll see that we can use other file formats to specify the file that is going to be used for the image source. Additionally, you will also find useful the alt attribute. The alt attribute is what is used for a couple of different reasons. One is it is going to display the alternate text in case the image file can in fact not be found. And it can also be utilized for applications that can read screen readers for those people, for instance, that are sight impaired. And a couple of other attributes that we're going to find useful is going to be the width and height. Now, in addition to the IMG tag, we're also going to combine a few other tags. We're going to take a look at an A tag, which allows for you to have a hyperlink or a link to another page or to another document or another resource in general. And we're also going to take a look at the button tag. But to begin with, what we want to do is we're going to bounce over to our IDE. In this case, I'm using Visual Studio, and I'm just going to simply create a new HTML page. Now, if you've been following along in this series, you know we've already created a number of HTML pages, so the name that you use is not terribly important. I'm going to continue with the theme of just calling these sample documents, and I have combined them into this introduction to HTML and CSS folder. In addition to that, I also already have an images subfolder. And in that images subfolder is just going to be a variety of different images. In this case, I have a PNG file as well as a couple of JPEG files that you may recognize from earlier videos. So we're going to continue the theme then and just simply call this then our sample. Let's go ahead and take a second to save this. I'm going to call this one sample_07. Again, there's nothing magical about that name. And I'm going to do the same thing with the title. I'm going to simply call this one sample_07.html. And of course, be careful to make sure that you have your closing tags correct. And we're going to just give this a description here with an H1 tag. And this is going to be a general introduction to images. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a P tag, although technically we don't need it. It's just going to be useful in sort of organizing the structure of this sample. And in that P tag, as we've seen in earlier videos, there are going to be a number of different tags that we can include, including an IMG tag. So again, you don't necessarily have to use the image tag inside of a P tag. It's just good for this particular example. And what we want to do is we want to start off with our source attribute. And you can simply pick the URL if you're using Visual Studio or if your IDE supports it, or you can remember the path to the files that you wish to display. In this case, the images that I want to display are in the images folder. And I'm going to start off with this PNG image of Blaze. So we can again just simply come in here to the IDE and we can pick the URL. In this case, the images and in Blaze, in the images folder and blaze.png. We also want to provide an alternate description for the image. In this case, I'm going to simply use the file name, blaze.png. You can, of course, be a little more descriptive than that, which brings us now to the width and the height. And we're going to play around with this a couple of times. We're actually going to start by right-clicking on the image for Blaze, and we can simply go to the properties for Blaze. And under the details, you can see that this is a relatively small image with the width being 244 pixels and the height being 207 pixels. So we're going to start off with the width and height as it is in the image. And we simply use the width attribute, so 244, and the height equal to 207. Again, let's bounce back over that and let's make sure that I got that right. Yes, the height was 207, the width was 244. And at this point, what I want to do is simply save this, and I'm going to go back over to Explorer one more time. I'm going to go to our sample underscore 07, and you can see here that in addition to the header, we have a nice image of Blaze. So let's play around a little bit with that height and width, and let's try to do, again, another image. I'm going to go ahead and include this in the same p tag just so you can understand how this is going to structure a document. You could, of course, put this outside the p tag or create another p tag. The main goal here is to see what happens when I, for instance, double the width. So in this case, I'm going to go from 244 up to 488, and I'm going to also go ahead and double the height to 414. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to come back over to my web browser. I'm simply going to go ahead and refresh it. And you can see that I now have a larger version of Blaze to the right of the initial image of Blaze. And again, to complete this example here, I'm going to just simply make a third copy of this. And we could play around with this all day long if we want to, but let's just go ahead and divide this one by 2. So I'm going to go with a width of 122, and I'm going to go with a height of 104. And I notice here I'm trying to round in such a fashion that keeps the aspect ratio correct. You can also go ahead and play with the width and height and disturb the aspect ratio of the original image, and it will technically work. And we go ahead and refresh this, and you can see now I have 3 different copies of our Blaze image. This is a pretty normal way of utilizing images in your web page. We do want to take a look now at how much flexibility we have with the use of images. In an earlier video, we have seen how to use hyperlinks, but we're going to combine now the hyperlinks with images, and you can actually create a linkable image. In other words, basically you can click on the image and it will behave just like a hyperlink. And to do that, well, we come back over here and we can just simply add now an A tag. I'm going to go ahead and use the href. I'm going to point it to the UAB website, which I have happened to pulled up in another browser tab just for the purposes of copying the URL. So again, it just needs to be a valid URL. And instead of putting text inside of the A tag, what you do is you simply come along, and again, you put another IMG tag, our SRC attribute, and again, we can pick the URL, or just for a little bit of variety, I'm going to go ahead and manually put this in here. Again, you just got to be careful about spelling this correctly. And again, we'll have now our images and our blaze.png. We're going to go ahead and use the alt attribute again. I'm going to keep it the same as the earlier examples. And there is our blaze.png. And we're just going to go back to the original width and height. So our width is going to be 244, and our height is going to be equal to 207. Probably are wondering why I didn't just simply copy and paste that. And I could have done that. It's kind of to emphasize the fact that you're simply nesting an image inside of a hyperlink. And if we save this and we come back out to our web browser one more time, and we simply go ahead and refresh, you'll see that now I have a 4th copy of Blaze. But unlike the first examples, which you'll notice here I have my cursor on and I'm attempting to click and I can't do anything with them. Well, in this case, I can click now on the image of Blaze and it will take me directly to the UAB's website. Now, as you recall from the earlier video, I can affect the target, meaning that I can open this in a new tab if I wanted to. And again, I'll leave that for another video. So you can see here that you can quickly and easily leverage a hyperlink with an image, or however you want to look at it. You can use an image inside of a hyperlink so that you have, again, a more pleasing aesthetic. Perhaps that's what you want to have happen. You want to click on an image and maybe select a product or something along those lines. Well, continuing with that theme, let's see about what other elements we can use an image with. And so another great example of this is going to be a button. And we'll start off with a button. Again, I'm going to go ahead and just start off with an empty button. Normally, I would put some text in there. We're going to play around with this, but main thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and insert an IMG tag, again with the same source. I'm going to pick the URL just to speed this up just a little bit. And again, what we could do is select images, blaze.png, follow this up again with the alt tag, or rather the alt attribute, and we'll have our blaze.png. And again, keep it simple. We're going to stick with the same width and height from the earlier example. There's our 207. Now, we're going to have to introduce a new attribute in this button, because right now, if you were to save this and then come back out to your web browser and refresh it, you'll see the button and you can click on it, but it won't actually do anything. And again, we're going to save some of this for later videos, but just so you have a little better feeling about what's actually going on here, I want to have some behavior associated with this button, much like with the with the A tag, and that we linked to another page. In this case, I simply want to be able to click on the button and know that it's actually working. I'm going to come back over here one more time to our document, and I'm going to go ahead and handle my on-click event. Now, this starts to take us down the road of JavaScript, and we'll get plenty of an opportunity to work with JavaScript, but I'm going to keep this one pretty simple in that I'm going to just simply have an alert, which is going to essentially pop up a message box in the browser, and I'm going to say something like, welcome from Blaze. In other words, just put some text in there that indicates that our button is in fact working. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to bounce back over to my web page, and I'm going to refresh it. Now, at this point, if I click on Blaze, then you'll see that I have a message that pops up at the top of the page. It says, welcome from Blaze. You want to be careful about using alerts, because they can get a little annoying, because they do take the cursor control or the focus away from the element on the page. And you'll notice that it's also blocking here, and that I cannot click on anything else until I click on the OK. However, it is a great way to check to make sure that a particular element on your page is working, or rather the JavaScript is working. And again, we'll look at JavaScript more in future videos, which brings us now to one additional use of images. In some cases, you might want to have the entire background of your document be an image. And for this example, I've decided to go with something a little bit different. I'm not going to use Blaze. Instead, what I've done is I've downloaded a background that is relatively homogeneous. In other words, there's just some sand here, but the idea here is that you could sort of see how you can use this as a nice peaceful background. And we're going to use this in a couple of different varieties. You can use whatever image you want to for this example. But what we're going to do is we're going to add it to the body tag of the document. Now, it turns out there's a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this, and we'll take a look at other examples in future videos. I sort of wanted to give this to you as a teaser, if you would, but you can come along here, and this is again an introduction to something new for us here. And this is going to be the introduction of inline styling of an element, in that I'm going to be able to add a style attribute. And what I can do is I can simply specify the background image. And there's a number of other things that we can specify. We can specify the background color, for instance, but we're going to stick with the background image. With style, it's going to be name value pairs separated by a colon. And then it turns out that you have to specify a URL for the image. Now, in this case, what we're going to do is very carefully have to type in the name and the relative path to that image file. In this case, the one with the sand. So we can come back over here to our document one more time, or rather our folder one more time, and you'll see that it is in our images subfolder, and there is our sand.jpg. We won't worry too much about the size, but you can, of course, just right click on the file and go to the properties and take a look at the number of pixels in the width and also the number of pixels in the height. Again, we may or may not need this depending on how you're planning on utilizing your background, but we are going to very carefully type in the images folder followed by the name of the file. In this case, it's going to be sand.jpg. Now you'll notice I kind of did this intentionally. I had a PNG file for one image and a JPEG for another. Turns out there's other image file formats that we can use, but this gets you started with a couple of them. We're going to go ahead and save this, and we're going to come back out here, and now we're going to refresh our page. And again, this sort of looks a little silly, maybe. Maybe you like the aesthetic. It's not really, the point is more of just so you can see that there's some variety here. You can use an image for your background. But what we can do is we can, instead of having this repetition of the background, we can have a single copy of the background. So you can add additional styling to the body element. Now, we are going to take a look at styling in later videos. So if this doesn't mean a lot to you right now, that's perfectly okay. As a matter of fact, it's probably not a great idea to style the element in line, and we'll discuss this in later videos as well. But for the purposes of this example, I am going to go ahead and add one more styling element, and that is going to be the background dash repeat. You can just simply type in a few characters here, in this case, background dash repeat, and then we can specify no repeat. And again, there's several different behaviors that you can utilize here. We're interested in the no repeat behavior, and we can come back out here. We can refresh the page. You can see now I have a single copy of that sand background. Well, let's say then that we wanted to have that single copy of this sand background spread out over the entire background. In other words, not just the same way as we saw it earlier where it's repeated, but a single image. And that we can simply go back one more time and we can specify yet another style feature. And that is going to be our background dash size. Again, we can come down here and you can see background dash size. And you can notice here there's a number of different options. The one that we're interested in for the purposes of this demonstration is going to be cover. And what this is going to do after you save this and refresh this, and you'll see that it uses that single copy of that sand image for my entire background. Now, this is probably not a great example, or you could argue this is a good example of a low quality image, probably not being your best choice for your web page. I didn't really worry too much for this particular example. You would probably want to use a slightly better quality background, but this was just intended so you could see the variations or variants of using then an image for your background. For instance, you might be happy with the repetition of the image and you would effectively then choose some sort of pattern that would look better. All sorts of different possibilities. And you'll also notice that I've given no care at all to the transparency of the buttons and the hyperlinks that I provided. In other words, you could see all the white around Blaze. We'll take a look at how to fix this in a later video. Instead, I want to focus then on the 4 uses of images in this particular example. One is just simply using an image inside of a p tag or inside some other element, just for the purposes of making your page look better. Maybe it's a bio picture, something along those lines. The second example is to use them inside of an a tag to allow for you to link to another document or some other feature, some other resource. The third one, of course, is the button click, which we will take a further look at JavaScript in other videos. And again, it's just a nice way of dressing up your buttons. In addition to text, you can have a nice visual image there. And then the fourth example here is where you can simply use an image to style an entire element. For instance, the body of the document. And it turns out there's a number of other tags or other elements that you can do this way. So hopefully you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you for watching.